Hi Giselle, welcome to When I Grow Up.
Hi, Nicolette. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Just for context for everyone listening, I actually found you through an ABC news article. I don't know you, I've never met you in person, but this article was all about career change, is a topic that's really close to my heart. I've changed careers multiple times and I've also worked with many women to make their own career change. And so I just absolutely loved your story moving from accounting into a really creative field. And so I was really happy to bring you on the podcast and just to hear a little bit about your backstory, but especially also that major career change experience that you had and what we can all learn from that. Maybe to kick us off, it would be great if you can share a little bit about your backstory because I know that you are also from the Philippines and you moved to Australia about a decade ago. So let's start at the start of your story.
Sure. Like you said, I grew up in the Philippines. I was born and raised in a small province called Bataan. And growing up, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. Of course, when I was a kid, I had like influences from my aunts, my parents. And I remember when I was really little, I wanted to be a doctor, I said. But as I grew up, that completely went out of the window. And so when I was in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. When I started taking entrance exams to universities, I didn't really know what course to put in the questionnaires. And so my parents, they helped me out choose which course I could be putting. I knew I wanted to do something in the arts or creative field, but in the Philippines, that's seen as a really risky or really careless decision. And so most of the entrance exam or uni applications I've applied to, I put in accounting as my first choice. And I think largely because back then it was a really good stepping stone to Australia. My brother was already here in Australia, and that's always been an option for our family to eventually go to Australia. I remember in one university, instead of two choices, it allowed me three choices. And that was the only university my parents allowed me to. Okay, you can put fine arts as a third choice. It was just something always at the back burner. And my parents
Yeah.
always told me, look, study to be an accountant, work as an accountant. Once you're stable, once you have the money, you can always do art whenever you can. And so I thought, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so I studied accounting in the Philippines. I graduated with a degree, but I never worked in the Philippines. I went straight to Australia to study a master's in accounting because that's my stepping stone to be able to stay here as well. And so I've done my master's here, worked as a bookkeeper to begin with, part time, and then I found another job or another employer that could sponsor me as an accountant. And so that's where my accounting career really grew, I would say.
I find that so fascinating that a lot of the times when we do think about career change, I encourage people to think about what were some of those passions and that hobbies you had as a child, because often the
Mm-hmm.
answer of, what you will really enjoy doing lies there. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely the full picture, but elements of that can be found in your childhood. And so I find that really interesting that that was actually what you wanted to do. And now 10 years later, or more than 10 years later, you're actually going back to that. So you spent 14 years in accounting and climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak. That's quite a long time. So I'm really curious, how did you make sense of this trajectory during that period? Did you at some point just accept that, okay, I'm just going to before you made that decision to change, yeah? Did you just think, okay, I'm just going to build this career, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder, I'm going to be CEO of this firm or some different firm? Did you kind of talk yourself into that is what you want to do, or change your mind that that is what you want to do? Or was there always this voice at the back of your head that said, this is really temporary?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. So the reason I stayed in accounting for the length that I stayed in accounting is because I needed it to stay in Australia. I couldn't have stayed here on an art career, unfortunately. I didn't have a degree in art or anything. So, yeah, so I told myself I just need to sort out my residency, my citizenship, and then I could do anything I want. So in a sense, it was like it started with, okay, when I make enough money, I'm gonna fall back to art. But then I came to Australia, okay, when I get my residency, I'll fall back to arts. And so yeah, that was my, I guess, hard deadline. And so when I got my residency, it took me maybe another year or two to, of course, I didn't want to just leave my sponsor employer who gave me residency to Australia and just say, okay, I got my residency, thank you, bye. And so I kind of wanted to give back to them as well. They've been really good to me. And so I wanted to serve them as well and, for them to get some value out of me as well. To be honest, I could have still given them value, but I felt like I felt comfortable enough that, yeah, it's time to think about what I want to do now.
You had to have this sense of security to be able to make such a big change. And as a South African that lived in Europe, and I'm also now a Dutch citizen, I so recognize that it's almost that you are, I won't say trapped, but it really limits your options because you have to be with an employer that can sponsor you. And that means it's a certain type of company, it's a certain size. And so that really limits your options, which I think is something that people that's not an expat or an immigrant doesn't always get, that kind of that lack of freedom that comes with it. Like, it's a huge opportunity, but in a certain sense it limits your career options. So when you then got to that point that, okay, I'm going to make the change, was it just that logical moment where you've kind of, let's say, paid your dues to the company, or was there any specific major experience that triggered that was like, okay, you know what, it's time, I'm leaving, this is it, I'm going to pursue my passion?
It was during a performance review. So we have this annual performance review with the company, and they basically give us a questionnaire. So there's a list of questions which we could reflect on. So it's up to us how serious we take it. And I really take that opportunity to reflect on what I've done in that employment for that year. And so after the questionnaire, you have a meeting with the bosses, with the partner, and with the manager. And one of the questions is, where do you see yourself 1 year from now, 3 years from now, and 5 years from now? And so I've answered the question 1 year. Probably I'm going to be an intermediate accountant. Maybe 3 years I'm going to be a senior accountant. And then in 5 years, I left it blank because I really couldn't see myself being an accountant for another 5 years. And so I left it blank in the questionnaire. And so when they asked me that question, I explained why I left it blank. And they were really supportive of me. They knew my hobby of art. And when I told them, look, I really want to start pursuing art as a more serious career and eventually become a full-time artist. And they were really supportive of that. So I think from there, it took maybe 2 years, another 2 years of working for them. And on the side, I do my own art. I didn't take any jobs per se, but it was more learning painting because I started painting during COVID. So I wasn't like fully into it yet. I was still learning as well. And then when I was wedding planning for my own wedding, I stumbled upon live painting. And I guess it was more of a financial decision to pick up live painting because, it's harder to sell original art if you don't have a name yet. And so I saw it as an in. Yeah, people spend on weddings. If anything, that's one of the main things that they would spend a big budget on. Yeah, I just saw it as a really good opportunity for me to start my art career, to start painting, start making money from the get-go. While I was still working at the accounting firm, I was already starting to do some small live paintings. I would do friends' weddings. I wouldn't charge that much. I would just charge the cost of materials. And my boss even got me for a wedding of one of our clients, of one of my accounting clients. And so it was a bit of like a really strange, but really fun to paint my client's wedding. And yeah, once I kind of saw that, yeah, I think I can do this. And I spoke to my husband. I was really starting to feel like, oh, I really want to do this now. I don't want to do it part-time anymore because I feel like I could do more if I was doing it full-time. And so back then we made that decision together, like, yeah, I think we have the money in case. to fall back on if it didn't work. And I could always go back to being an accountant, worst case, because my employer actually told me that, look, you're always welcome. They even said, I know that it's gonna work, but if you do decide to come back, you're always welcome to come back. And so I've had that sense of security in that way as well. So it made the decision a bit easier.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think what I'm hearing in that is quite a pragmatic approach to change. I think sometimes we make the mistake to stick around until we are so fed up that we just either cold quit or quit and go find another job or something that's not exactly right for us. But you actually had this 2-year lead up to having the conversation, to planning, to testing it out on the side and seeing whether it is actually something you want to do as a job or as a business rather. And so I absolutely love that. But what I hear in there is that crucial to that exploration and making that change was also the relationship you had with this company and with your boss. How did you have to build up that relationship so that you can feel comfortable to openly have these conversations, whereas a lot of the times I think we feel that's something we need to hide from our employer, that we might be considering leaving?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, it wasn't a huge company. It was a company with maybe 15 to 20 employees when I was there. And so being a family owned business, it already started with it being like a bit more warm, let's say. And my boss, since the beginning, I could tell that he was honest. First of all, he cared for his employees. I remember one of the reasons I trusted him with this idea was when I was first sponsored by this company. I was sponsored as a temporary visa, which means I needed to stay with them. Otherwise, my visa could get canceled. Eventually, after working for a year with them, I found out that I could be sponsored as a permanent resident, which means if they sponsor me as a permanent, once I get my permanent residency, I could just leave the company. I don't have to stay and keep working for them to stay in the country. And so I told him that idea. And then he asked me, what's the difference? We already sponsored you. And so I told him, like, look, the difference is I don't have to stay here anymore. I could go anywhere, or I could leave the company. I could still stay in the country. And his response to me was, look, I don't want to hold your visa on your head or put you in a headlock to keep working for us. And so when he found that out, he then proceeded to sponsor me as a permanent resident, fully knowing that I could leave anytime. And so I guess that's what built that confidence and trust in me. So when I then felt like, oh, I needed to pursue my art career now, I had no problem, sharing that information with them, knowing that they wouldn't hold it against me. They wouldn't withhold good clients for me just because they know I might leave anytime. It's just the culture that they've created within the company. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. And I think that's one of the reasons why as well I felt comfortable pursuing my passion, because it's not like, oh, I'm in such a bad accounting firm. I need to find another accounting firm to keep working and keep building financially. No, I was really happy where I was. And I told them that. I told them, if I'm an accountant, this is where I'm going to be. I won't work anywhere else.
That's so cool. I think that's so rare, but it's just fantastic to hear that because they were open and they trusted you so much, you actually stayed much longer than you would have
100%.
maybe otherwise. And so it just pays back, which is fantastic. Can you talk us through what that change actually looks like? Because something that can really hold us back from making such a major change is that unknown, and especially the risk element around it, giving up a salary. I think from the article I saw, you said something that you took quite a big cut in salary making this shift. So talk us through what went through your head. How did you make the change? What had to be in place? And what was kind of the practicalities around making this work?
So we had a bit of savings put aside already. So I guess I kind of had that runway. I could stay without wedding bookings and we would still survive, let's say. And I didn't know I was pregnant when we decided to make the jump. And so I've already quit my job when I found out that I was pregnant. And then when we found out I was pregnant, I asked my husband, are we still going to do this? Now it's different. And what he told me was, yeah, we've made that decision already. And if I don't do this now, I probably would never do it once I have a child. And, it's more comfortable to just have a stable job with a child. Another thing would be, we've done the calculations and the projections. If it would take time to get there, but it would actually be faster to get there than if I was an accountant.
I love the way you approach that. I could hear the accountant in the way that you were speaking, the pragmatic plan, doing the calculations, doing the projections, having the savings. But, I think that's let's say, the unsexy things about making it a reality. You can have the big dream, you can have the vision, but at the end of the day, you need to pay your bills, you need to get by. And so I think that's just a key piece of work to do. Now that you're building this business, what has been for you kind of the biggest lessons from this experience, and how do you reflect back now on your accounting career versus what you're doing now? I can imagine it's a whole different world.
I guess looking back, it was a part of owning your own business and building your own business. Is last year I was a bit more desperate in taking bookings, which meant in October and November, which are busy wedding seasons, I took like 5 weddings each month. And now I have this backlog of paintings to touch up. And I think one of the lessons would be just to set expectations, of course, with the clients. I've been blessed with really good couples who were really understanding, because I couldn't keep up with the workload now that I have a baby as well. I realized that I should adjust the number of bookings based on my life instead of my life based on the number of bookings. And so this year I've decided, okay, I'm gonna probably cap the number of bookings I would take in a month to make sure that I could cater to all couples and to make sure that I deliver their paintings on time, while I could still look after my child in the way that I want to look after her, which is I don't want to put her in childcare for now, maybe eventually, but I would like to keep her home with us for now. That included adjusting my pricing. Now that I have more in my portfolio, now that I have more reputation, I could actually increase my prices, and having the confidence as well. Back then when I was starting, if someone asks for a discount, I jump on it and say, yes, whatever you want, as long as you book with me. But now it's more like, if they ask for a discount, I respectfully explain that my pricing reflect the quality and the hours I put in each painting. And I understand that weddings come with a budget, but for me to be able to provide and deliver that quality to all my couples, that's the price that they would need to pay. Those are the 2 biggest lessons I've learned so far.
Something that I've struggled with in, going independent with the coaching and the consulting is this issue around the price and knowing your worth and balancing getting enough work in. But if you do it at too low a price, which I think is initially the inclination, okay, let me just discount it, let me get clients in. But then you are so busy with these clients that's actually paying you much less than you want to be paid or deserve to be paid, that you actually don't have the time to go find those other clients or to take on those other bookings. And so it's this balance between I need to pay my bills and bring in the work versus this is the vision I have for my business and what I know my worth is. It's easy to fall into the trap of I've got a passion, let me build a business around it, go into it head first. But then at some stage you realize either it's not sustainable or what it will take for this to be sustainable in terms of the number of customers or what I have to put into it. It doesn't make it worth it. And sometimes people then actually go back to a full-time job to make it sustainable. And so I'm just wondering, in your business right now, what are some of those elements that you feel you really need to still work on to be able to make this sustainable in the long run?
One of my biggest weakness in my artworks is I spend a lot of time focusing on details, which I realize and I learned so far a lot of people don't care about it as much as I do. And so I spent a lot of hours in my studio working on a painting that I've already spent 10 hours on the wedding day itself. And that kind of just blows up the time I spend on one painting. And of course, my time costs money, and of course the cost blows up as well. And so I've been learning that I should shift my mindset to think about what the client wants and what the client thinks are important instead of what I think is important. So I've always thought, oh yeah, the background should have all the details I could put in it. Well, I realized they don't really care about the background as much as they care about the couple. So I should shift my focus on putting details into the couple and having a more rough background. So I spend less time in my studio, and as a result, I spend less money on that painting. So it would also allow me to take more bookings and grow my business more, take on more clients. Another would be just the pricing as well. Now that I know my value, like I've mentioned, for it to be sustainable and for me to keep on having the same lifestyle that we want to achieve, I think is to keep on reviewing my pricing and packages to adjust based on, of course, not unreasonably, but based on the quality and the experience I'm putting in as I'm becoming more experienced as a painter as well.
Yeah, I totally resonate with especially the first one. I'm also a perfectionist, and it's kind of comfortable that in a job you know when you need to stop because there's a client deadline or like the office is going to close or whatever the case might be. But when you're working for yourself, there's nothing really stopping you. And so you kind of have to make this decision. You can always improve, it can always be more perfect, but at some point it's good enough. And then feeling
That's
okay
right.
just to put it out into the world is
I
really
completely
hard.
agree. That's right.
What I was just wondering as you were talking about, because it started with the creativity and in COVID you went back to painting. And I can hear now it's really, of course it becomes a business, it becomes a business, it becomes a job. There's all the realities of it. Are you still enjoying the painting, or has it gone from something that's a passion to just like a 9 to 5 in a different shape and form?
That's a great question because I vividly remember my boss. One of the quotes that resonated or stuck with me was when I was about to quit my job. He said, "Look, at the moment you love painting. Once money gets involved, that might change. It might not be something you love anymore. It might be something you're doing because of the money or because, you have to. It's different when it's an obligation, and it's different when you're doing it because you want to." And that really scared me when I was about to leave my accounting job because I thought, oh my God, what if he's right? What if I realize I don't like it anymore because I'm getting paid to do it? Now I have to go. Now I have to paint. And I'm going to be honest, there was a phase in the last year that I felt that. And I think a big factor was, I just gave birth. I was tired. I just wanted to spend time with my baby, but I have to paint. There are paintings to be done. I have no choice. And I think what shifted my mindset was, I guess I just had to remind myself, this is what I've always dreamed of since I was a kid, and now I'm living it. I guess it's all part of that business building and, following your passions. Of course, now it's not going to be just a passion anymore or a hobby. It's going to be your career. Now it's serious. Now there's something at stake, I would say. I just had to snap out of it, to be honest. A lot of the things we do that are worth it are the things we do not based on our feelings, but based on just powering through and persevering and doing it not because you have to, but because you want to. So now I feel a bit less, and now it's easier for me to just sit down and start painting regardless of what I'm feeling. Because I used to be a really moody artist, as they say. I'm like, oh, I'm not really in the mood to paint today. Maybe I won't paint. So I was guilty of that. But now it's just, yep, let's do it. I'm gonna sit down, pick up my brushes, and start painting.
I think that's the thing when your passion becomes your business, that you don't have the luxury of just doing it on the weekends or whenever you feel inspired to pick up the brush. It's actually you need to get it done. Like you have client agreements and so on. And
That's
it
right.
sounds a bit, when you were talking about that, it sounds like it comes down to that gratitude. And my husband always tells me when I like to, sometimes just complain for the sake of complaining or don't feel like something. He always said, you don't have to do it, you get to do it. And you just use that
Wow.
line as well. And so I think that's the reframing and the gratitude of it, is that yeah, I get to sit today and work on a project that's for my own client, where I get the income to my business and I decide how I want to collaborate with the client versus what is the alternative, being back in the office, working for a different company and doing everything on their terms. And you have so little control in that example of you just want to be with your baby. Like, yeah, you get to then after you've had this, done this work on your own terms, go be with her versus being in the office 24/7. And so I think that's a super helpful reframe to do.
100%.
So we're coming to the end of our conversation. Just wanted to check with you whether there's anything on your mind that you still wanted to share.
I guess I just wanted to end it with, it does seem scary and it's never gonna feel like the right time. And if you base your decisions on that feeling, you'll never make that jump because it's not the logical decision. Let's be completely honest. A stable job is the logical decision, especially if you're in Australia with the high cost of living and high cost of properties. Just makes more sense to stay in a more stable job. So I think making that decision, it takes a lot of courage and also a lot of planning. It's not something you just throw up in the air and say, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. No, it takes a lot of gut and a lot of budgeting and planning. But once you do it, it's I would say it was one of the best decisions I've made in my life.
Oh, that's a great encouragement. Thanks for sharing that. I like that question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I've never really liked that exercise because I think it's a weird, how do we know where we want to be in 5 years? But what that triggered for you was, I don't want to be here. Okay, so where then? And I think that triggers the question. And if it's not there, you can stay in that job without taking any action, or you can do what you did and actually plan really practically and pragmatically what that looks like, even if it maybe doesn't make traditional sense in a way. But if you know deep down inside that this is something that you want, then make it happen. You are the only person that can do that. So thanks so much for sharing that. We're going to end out on a few rapid fire questions. So the first one is, if you didn't have to work, what would you be doing with your time?
Probably still painting and spending time with my family.
The second one is, if you had to choose one of your past jobs to do for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
I only had accounting, so I'd probably be an accountant.
Yeah, if there was only one, then if you've only done one thing in the past, then that makes sense. If you could get a do-over for one of your career decisions, which one would it be?
That's hard because I feel like I don't regret anything from back then.
Okay, perfect. The fourth one, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of career advice, what would you say?
I would say it's okay to do something you don't want to do temporarily so that you can then do what you love permanently.
Love that. The last question is just for you to complete the sentence. When I grow up,
I want to still be an artist and to share my art to the world.
That's beautiful, Joselle. If someone wants to have a look at your art or explore booking you for their wedding, where can they go? Where do they find you?
I'm called Your Wedding Artist. So my website is www.yourweddingart.ist. And yeah, they could also follow me on Instagram and TikTok to see more content on what happens on the wedding day and some fun videos on, live wedding painting.
Awesome. I'll make sure we also share the link so people can check you out there. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. It's one of a lot of courage, but also being really pragmatic and taking control of your career story. Thank you, Joselle.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.